Cal Poly really allowed me to, I guess, open my wings for other things that I didn't think I had the capability to do so, but it was a great experience. And I think all of that trickled into my graduate program. So that's a little bit about what I did at Cal Poly.
Yeah, Corey Hansen, how you guys doing? I grew up pretty locally, got into some schools that I was hoping to go to, and my parents didn't really want to pay for them. So I ended up at Cal Poly, and initially you want to go away to school, and I didn't end up doing that, so I was kind of bummed out. But I ended up really loving the school. Um, you know, at first I commuted and didn't feel like I was part of the campus, and then after a couple years, I did. I don't even know what it's called. Right off campus by the pumpkin patch. What's that called? What are those apartments?
Farm store.
Okay, I used to live in those apartments, and that's where it
Village.
started. That's where it's really started. Just getting to know the community, being more a part of campus, and then I went on the Hawaii trip, and that honestly had a pretty big impact on my life. As Dr. D said, I was a business major. Planning on getting into business. I did initially after graduating, just because that's kind of the way that I went. But when we went on the trip, I loved working with kids. We had a little internship, and it was just awesome. It was a passion, and I didn't really see myself doing business beyond that point. Like I said, I had a short stint in it, and after that, I just changed my mind. I did fraternity on campus. Some of you may love that, some of you may hate that, but I felt like it did prepare me with working with people and contacts and finances and all kinds of different things. But that was kind of my experience at Cal Poly.
Oh, my experience with Cal Poly, it's like where do you start, right? When you're looking at that. I'm first generation college student, so born and raised in Santa Ana. Knew that education was valued in my family, but beyond saying, hey, it's something you should do, there wasn't kind of the connection of how to do it, right? So with that said, how I ended up going from Santa Ana to Cal Poly Pomona was I didn't know where Cal Poly Pomona was. I actually ended up checking out Cal Poly Pomona because my girlfriend at the time in high school, who's now my wife, we were like seniors in high school, and she was a pre-vet major at Cal Poly Pomona. She's like, hey, I'm gonna go up to Cal Poly to check out the campus. Want to go? I'm like, sure. If you're going, okay, we'll check it out. Went onto the campus, loved the agricultural feel of the campus. It felt like you were away, but not really away. So as a first gen student and I actually had the privilege of living on campus, it really provided that opportunity and that space for growth. For me at Cal Poly was really the first time I felt validated and heard in the educational setting, right? A lot of that has to do with Mary. I remember her specifically telling me, come to my office hours when I took Soch 1, and as a college counselor, I share this with students all the time. She's like, come to my office hours. I'm like, as a first gen student first, I don't know what the heck office hours are. I'm like, am I in trouble? What did I do, right? And then obviously you all know the importance of office hours and connecting and getting that mentorship, if you will, right? So was very involved in the social department, did the Hawaii trip, did AKD, was involved in ASI and also Hermanos Unidos, and all of the connections and the involvement, in terms of what I did outside of the classroom, really made me feel supported and really, being more engaged on campus led to me excelling academically, which was the perfect fit for me. It's like one of those things, didn't plan to go there, but, wouldn't have it any other way. As a matter of fact, was it about 2 weekends ago, my wife and I took our two little ones to the Pumpkin Fest. So that was cool, doing that. But yeah, that's it. In a nutshell, that was my connection to Cal Poly, is my connection to Cal Poly. And now, of course, for folks that didn't hear, talk about coming full circle, I have the good fortune of being the college counselor for both of Mary's young women, both of her daughters. So
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you all for sharing a little bit about your experiences. And, you know, I heard, I think all of you touch on that you grew up, you know, relatively locally. Some of you are first gen college students, which I think resonates with a lot of the students at Cal Poly, as well as just in the peer mentor cohort. And so I was wondering if you folks could kind of elaborate a little bit on, tell us a little bit about, you know, your upbringings and your family maybe, and how that drove you into the fields that you're in now. Because I kind of think that, you know, when you're in counseling fields or career similar to that, there's usually something internally that drives you to want to be of service to folks like that. So if you folks could talk about that a little bit, and maybe some obstacles or challenges you faced along the way as well, and how you overcame that. I can also clarify if that's at all confusing.
Yeah, I can start. I grew up with 3 sisters. I had a great family. We were all 2 years apart, all really tight. My parents are awesome. We never had tons of struggles. Neither parent went to college, but definitely made ends meet. I feel like it was a pretty good upbringing. I never had the intention in going into counseling or working out of school. We didn't have like a lot of teachers in the family. A lot of times you get that, right? Parents are teachers, kids become teachers, counselors, whatever the case may be. It really, for me, was honestly that trip. Like it kind of got the wheels spinning for me. And just making different types of friends that you probably normally wouldn't come in contact with. And seeing the value in the relationships between, you know, I guess we were kind of adults, not really. I mean, some of the things we were doing, and just younger kids, there's so much value in that. And I don't know, I almost feel like you vicariously live through the students, right? You put yourself in their shoes when you were that age, and just being a part of a campus is fun. I'm sure Dr. D, I mean, like you said, you haven't retired yet. There's a reason for that, I'm sure. It's just awesome working out of school. So I don't know if I answered your questions or not, but yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Mhm.
I could go next. So I guess for my upbringing, a lot of my core values stem from family, and that a lot of the decisions or any conversations that I have are just based off of family. And I think that stems from my parents being immigrants from Jalisco, Mexico, and my dad, of course, my parents coming to the US to pursue what their definition was of their American dream. And for them, it was for their children to pursue a higher level of education that they weren't able to achieve back home in Mexico. And I think for me, seeing my father come home tired from his construction job, seeing my mom being a stay-at-home mom and being able to support us, both myself, my brother, and my sister, me being the oldest, it was very important for me not only to pursue education, but to do something that I was very passionate about. And I think for me at a young age, it was probably around high school where I felt that I had that first initial exposure of my ultimate goal, which was through my high school counselor. I also participated in a program called the Bright Prospect during high school, which kind of opened my opportunities to various different field works that I didn't think were open. Of course, I always thought I want to help people, but I don't want to be a nurse because I don't like needles, but I don't know if I see myself teaching. So I think through my exposure at Cal Poly, being involved in PM, being able to see what the advising center, for example, at class was able to do for me, being able to have that advisor that genuinely cared about you, just reinforced why I wanted to be in the field that I am. And I am extremely passionate about building relationships with students for them to be able to trust me and able to with them during their journey. A lot of the times, of course, for your first generation journey may not represent all of the students' first generation journeys, but being able to have a relatable impact could go a long way, right? So I hope I answered the question.
Yes, no, that was great hearing about like your values and how that's kind of impacted and influenced you. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, along the lines, I think of what Corey and Dominique have shared. In terms of, I shared earlier that education was a value that was instilled in my family, but what does that look like, right? Was where I had to navigate that as a first generation college student. So I'm the middle child of three. My older sister did the community college route, and I think her experience is a big reason of why the community college setting is near and dear to my heart. She did kind of really the non-traditional route, and what I mean by that, worked full-time, went to school part-time, took her almost 8 years to transfer to Cal State Fullerton, did earn her bachelor's degree. So coming up in a first-gen family and also a single-parent home, when I finished high school, my assumption was I'm gonna do education, because I know my mom told me you better, and I had the example of my sister. But what I thought was, and again, this is nothing to undersell the value of a community college because I firmly believe in the mission of it, but it was simply, well, I know I'm gonna go to Santa Ana College and then figure out from there, right? And I remember my senior year, my sister was like, no, you have an opportunity. I don't care if it's only 20 miles away, but you need to get out of this space for a little bit. And I didn't understand what that meant at that point. But because of that, I was able to get connected at Cal Poly, right? And having that balance of being able to, which is really difficult when you talk about the family and the collective value, right? Of saying it's okay to be a little selfish for a bit of your time in college, but knowing that the underlying motivator for you in college is representing your community and your family, right? That nudge that my sister gave me, that again, I don't care if you're only going, 20 miles up to 57, you need to get away from this space. And her rationale years later when we had that conversation was, if you stay here, right, in terms of our little 2-bedroom apartment, you're gonna start working, you're gonna wanna work more to help the family, you're gonna put your education on the back burner, if you will. And she was right? She was completely right. And I will acknowledge that privilege that I received from her experience, right? When I got to Cal Poly, even though I grew and really blossomed in my final 3 years there, my first year, I significantly struggled. I was an EOP student, was at risk of getting dismissed back when we still did developmental math. And, trying to find my way, similar to what Dominique mentioned. Well, I know I like working with people, but what does that mean when there's like hundreds of majors, right? So I think I somehow stumbled into Building 5 and was looking at those advising sheets that they have on the first floor. Well, what's psychology? What's sociology? Back then, what's behavioral science, right? And took a psych course, wasn't kind of completely my thing, and then kind of just consumed me. And I'm like, oh wow, this is what it's like when you actually are engaged in the learning process, right? And feel seen and heard in the literature and so forth. So earned my bachelor's degree. Now as a college counselor, I also teach a career exploration course, and I did a couple of internships. One of the internships I did with the Hawaii program, beyond it being an awesome experience like Corey talked about, I did a social work internship. And I initially thought, hey, let's do social. Maybe I want to be a social worker. I like helping people, right? Did the social work internship in Hawaii. And I was like, this really isn't my thing, right? And again, that's the benefit of doing internships. Yes, they can get you the exposure to maybe what's going to be your path. But as valuable is when you can do something and really say, hey, maybe I don't want to spend my energy here, right? As well. But, similarly, those experiential opportunities really rounded out the experience of really maximizing college as opposed to just being transformational instead of it just being a transaction that you did for a couple of years.
Yeah, no, I think that's really valuable for a lot of us to hear as we're kind of like looking at internships and thinking about where we want to go after Cal Poly. So that's really helpful advice. And I guess now I think I want to move into kind of talking a little bit more about what you guys each do specifically. And I kind of want to open it up too, so that's more of like a conversation between, you know, the three of you as well as me. So feel free to just kind of talk about, you know, what do you do for work? How exactly did you get there after Cal Poly? You know, I know that some of you have a master's versus a PhD. So just kind of talking about what led you to do what you do now and what it is exactly that you do and like what do you do day to day and who are the people that you're working with. And, you know, after you're done kind of responding, if you guys want to just pass the mic to each other and feel free to ask each other questions as well. So whoever would like to start off with that, please take it away.
I can start on that one. One of the things that I value about my job, even though there is a common thread of working with students daily, right? And one of the things that I love about the community college setting, especially Irvine Valley, it's really a microcosm of ranges of experiences, right? When I'm working with students, it can be very well the first gen student who is just trying to figure out how to get through their first semester in the COVID environment. What does that look like? To the next student that I'm working with being a second generation engineering major that's going to go to Berkeley because that's where mom and dad went as well, right? I think that highlights the value, again, of the community college setting and the range of students that you're going to work with. And as an educator and as a counselor, I appreciate that because, again, we know we were talking about the range of experiences that people have and being able to interact in the higher ed setting, how powerful that is, right? So personally, I enjoy that one-on-one component, but even though you're working with individual students daily, it's because of the range of experiences that students bring to campus, really no 2 days look alike, if you will. That's that value of working directly one-on-one with students. As was mentioned, I'm now my department co-chair, so I also spend a significant amount of time in meetings, a little bit more than I would prefer to sometime, but it's really that combination of the systemic planning that we do at that level in combination with the individual interactions that I think really allows me to have a career that I personally feel is really fulfilling and feel like I leave every day making some kind of impact. So I love it. No 2 days are the same.
I would say, so after Cal Poly, I think they were saying I started substitute teaching because, you know, I didn't have a social degree or psych degree or anything like that. So a lot of the schools won't accept you, right? A business major trying to go into counseling. So I kind of dipped my toes in the substitute teaching realm, and it was fun. I liked it. I started at Azusa High and Azusa, and I enjoyed that a lot. And then I'm like, what can I do with this? You know what I mean? Like, do I want to be a teacher? Do I not? I never intended to be a teacher, but I just kind of wanted to check out the school setting. So I looked around, like APU, Laverne, I think Chapman had a program, and I enjoyed that one-on-one contact. So I was like, I'm going to try to be a school counselor. Why not? You know? So I got in, I think I was on probation, to be honest with you, because I didn't have a social degree or psychology degree. I ended up going to APU. I liked their program the best. And I did the PPS credential and the master's in educational counseling, which you guys may have done too. At the same time, during that time, I worked in South Central LA for a year or so. And then at the end of my program, I got the opportunity for an internship in Baldwin Park at the continuation high school, and I taught intervention classes. And that was really cool. I liked it a lot. At the time, I think I got my job in 2009. I was super lucky. there was, counseling positions are kind of few and far between, right? If you have 50 teachers, you might have 2 counselors, right? And when I was applying, I'm just going to tell you guys this because was super helpful for me. So I think in the interview process for whatever position you go into, you need to try to get some kind of edge because you don't have the experience, right? I didn't have the experience either. I had substitute teaching and teaching some intervention classes at a high school, a continuation school. And a lot of times you're going up, with any job, people 10 years experience, 5 years experience, whatever the case may be. So when I applied for this job, it was like 300 and something applicants, right? And so what I did is I made sure that I was getting letters of recommendations from people that do the hiring, right? So I think one mistake, and when I have interns, I try to share this information with, it's like, yeah, you might get a master teacher letter of rec, which is good, which is great. You might get a teacher recommendation, but who is doing the hiring, right? Would a principal vouch for you? Would they say something good about you? If you're substitute teaching there, make those contacts with the principals, the assistant principals, the counselor, the teacher, the classroom aide. You want to show versatility and that you collaborate well with, people across the board, right? So that is one tip that I will give you. And then also practicing interviews with people that do the job and calling the district and seeing what they're looking for. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of counselor are they looking for? All those kind of things. And I probably went off topic, but the interns that I have had have gotten jobs, and a lot of people that go to school counseling, take a while to get a job. So anyhow, I've been at this position at the middle school for about 13 years, 12, 13 years, something like that. And, there's different opportunities, right? We're all in different areas, and you kind of need to find what suits you and like where your strengths are at and where your passions are at. And for me, middle school, at the sites that I've worked at, middle school is the most hectic for sure. I mean, that I've been at, right? But kids joke around, kids mess around, and they're fun and they're learning and they need you. They listen to you, and maybe they don't want to talk to their parents the same way. And the high school level is great. Like, I really enjoyed that, but at least in the settings I worked at, you're going into the office and you're working on transcripts and, prepping them for college. And some people, that's their niche and they love that. But for me, like, I'm out there on campus every day. I'm in the classrooms. I'm able to coach, right? Sometimes I'll do like a fishing club. Like I get to do the extras that for me makes me feel like I have more of a connection, because it's not just, I'm calling the kids in. Like, I'm trying to learn the curriculum in the classroom. So if I'm telling the kids, hey, you need to do better at this, I need to be able to help them with their homework, right? I need to understand what's going on. So I'm fortunate. The school that I work at, the leadership is great. We have a great counseling team. And yeah, I don't think I'm going to hang up the boots anytime soon. Like, I enjoy it, so.
Awesome. So I'll go ahead and talk about my experience a little bit. So as I mentioned earlier, previously, I graduated in May 2021. So right towards the tail end of my graduation date, I was job hunting. But previous to that, when I began my graduate program at EPU, I was in the CCSD program. My goal was to have an assistantship or work off campus of some sort, because previous to that, I didn't have a job that was related to the field that I wanted to go into. Thankfully, I had the opportunity to be a graduate assistant for a Gen 1 Scholars Program at APU. I had the opportunity to co-facilitate and co-teach a course while at APU. And then I began working at Chaffey Community College and Pasadena City College, both as success coach and a success guide. So a lot of my roles really stem from caseload management and being able to support students as they are in community college and transferring out of community college, both on the academic advising lines and more of social, like emotional support. And I have this position that I'm currently in as a college success coordinator. I just had my 2-month anniversary, so I'm fresh, very fresh into the role. So with a lot of energy and a lot of excitement, but a couple of tips that I could say while you're in the process of applying to schools, job hunting, I think for me, and not being afraid to dip your toes in the water in different areas within counseling. There's career counseling, there is opportunities in residence life if you're looking into higher education. And for example, there's community colleges, the UC system, the Cal State system. So really one thing that I did that was very helpful to help me kind of engage in different opportunities that were going to help me get exposure was to tap on maybe a colleague that may have gone through that process already and having them share their experience with me. Because as a first generation student, of course, my parents supported me by either packing my lunch or my dad checking my air tires, the air on my tires. But I really had to tap on those that had already gone through the process. So I think that's a tip that really helped me. And in my current role, my day-to-day does not look the same at all. I support our scholars through college, which means that me and my colleagues focus on building programming for our students, building relationships, navigating anything that has to do with financial aid, and navigating a new college campus as they transition into their institution. I have scholars on my caseload that are out of state, that are in community colleges and up north. So very an array of students. A lot of them come with a varying different either challenges or experiences as a first generation student. So I think my role, I'm very grateful for the team that I have. They have been very welcoming. And that is something that I looked in. I think it comes from, I don't know, I really value family. So being able to have that represented in the workplace for me was something that I looked for to feel comfortable and supported by the team. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you all kind of gave us some helpful tips and things to think about. And what you each do is kind of, similar, but it sounds very different as well. So I think that's really awesome. And I just want to give Fatima a chance now to ask you folks a question as well.
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting how Dominique touched on the topic of how there's so many different types of counseling careers that anyone can choose, because when you first think of a counselor, you automatically think of a school counselor, where that's completely false. There's actually multiple different types of counseling. And I also find it super interesting how each and every one of you are very different when it comes to your counseling career choices. One is a middle school counselor, the other one's a community college, and the other one's a nonprofit. So that's very different routes, but also it's probably different in their own ways as well. And people who are trying to figure out like what jobs they want to do or like who they would want to work with, it's just very interesting. So I guess my question for you is, or I guess it's a 2-in-1, and we can make this the last question before Q&A. So how did you know, and how did you find out the group of people that you wanted to work with? How did you know that you wanted to be in that specific counseling field? And also for the students who are also graduating in spring or are planning on applying for a graduate school or even trying to job hunt after they graduate, what are some tips? Even though both Corey and Dominique did give some really useful tips, if you had any more tips with, for the fourth years that are going to graduate soon, or people who are applying for graduate schools. So yeah, the 2 questions, and that'll be all.
Yeah. So I love your question. How did you know? And so the first thing is, I'll say that I didn't know, right? And I'll say that for those of you that are getting ready to finish up and you feel that pressure of, oh my gosh, I got to figure out what I'm doing with the rest of my life in the next 4 days. You don't, okay? You don't. I do want you progressing, but you don't have to have it all figured out tomorrow, right? So it's not a linear process. I think it's okay to give yourself the room to explore, and you're on your own timeline, right? I think it's so. I took a year between undergrad and applying to grad school because I wasn't sure. I knew that I wanted to work with people, but I didn't know exactly what that meant, right? So I intentionally took that year. I was actually a TA at a middle school in LA because I was still thinking maybe teaching, like I had narrowed it down to education, but is it teaching, is it counseling, what does that mean? I intentionally took that year to do that exploration and to really research graduate programs and do what Dominique mentioned. And by then being connected to mentors like Mary and others of doing informational interviews and asking myself those questions. Hey, if I'm gonna do grad school, hey, I completed a bachelor's degree and had great mentorship and preparation. So what kind of grad program am I looking at? Am I looking at something locally, or am I perhaps considering doing something out of state, which is what I decided to do, right? I think as part of hearing others tell me that it was okay to take my time to do that exploration, allowed me to make a decision that I was more comfortable with. I gotta say, and I did the same thing. I have a master's of social work, first counseling, then what does that look like? Is it marriage family therapy? Is it school counseling? Is it college counseling, right? I think I landed on counseling and personnel services. So it's the college counseling component and a blend of administration as well. I really looked at the program and looked at the classes I would be taking, right? And hey, you know, as a bit of a higher ed nerd, like I'd be excited about studying this and learning this, right? I think to the point that Corey made earlier, also looking at the type of like internship or assistantship opportunities that different programs are going to help you facilitate, right? As much as you're looking at the program, what kind of supports are there, right, at that institution? Is it somewhere that you feel that you'd want a new experience? I will say selfishly, and I know that's not something that's always feasible, but I would encourage you, if you have that opportunity to maybe explore something that's out of state or outside of Southern California, SoCal will always be here, you know, God willing. But I will say that that perspective of moving to the East Coast really broadened my perspective of working with others and gaining a familiarity for others' life experiences beyond what I knew on the daily, right? And I think that still informs the type of work that I do as an educator. So my point is, again, it's not a linear process. That's okay to be unsure as you're going through that process, and really nobody does it alone, right? So, you know, reaching out to your network to ask those questions of what does that look like, and to go from there, right? And maybe it's social work one day, maybe it's school counseling the other day, and going from there. But giving yourself the room to explore, my point.
I think for me, initially I had a streamlined idea of what population or what student group at what university I wanted to work with. But as I mentioned, I was finishing, my first year of graduate school was in person. My second year was completely 100% virtual, which shifted a lot of plans that I had. Unfortunately, at that time, I lost both of my roles, and I was really just open to opportunities. And that time really allowed me to reflect on what I wanted, what was going to make me happy. And my goal ideally was to serve students. Like I wanted to ensure that regardless of where I ended up at, that I was going to be working with students and enjoying that. So I think a tip that I would provide you all as those that are preparing to apply for graduate school, attend info sessions, whether they're in person or not, virtually, and take a look at the curriculum, take a look at the courses that they offer. At APU, courses that were embedded into my program related to diversity, career counseling, administration of student affairs. And within those courses, we were assigned projects that allowed us to explore other areas of interest. I really like what Angel mentioned of doing informational interviews. That is something that I actually had to do as an assignment as a part of the curriculum for one of the courses that I had. And I interviewed a career counselor, which is something that I would not originally would have done if I had not been in that course, right? So asking what kind of courses are offered. Usually that's information that's listed on the website, but in the case that it isn't, I didn't do this, but I saw other people do this that were interested in the program that I attended. They actually connected with the department to see if they could shadow a class before applying to the program. So if that's even feasible or possible, it's a great opportunity to do so, not only for you to explore what other opportunities are in, but also asking them, how do you support your students in the program with seeking for opportunities such as assistantships or internships? My program actually assisted me with finding my opportunities at Pasadena City College and at Chaffey College. And I think after that period of 2020, being able to have all that time to reflect, I wanted to work in a space where I was able to embed programming, strategy, and being able to serve students through a caseload management. And that's exactly what I'm very grateful that I was able to find during the time. Job hunting is an interesting journey. Do not give up, be patient. There's going to be 10 no's, but after that 10 no's, there's going to be one yes. And that one yes will be life changing. So
Why not you, right? Right? Why not you be the person that gets the job? And kind of like Angel was saying, I didn't really know either. Like every school that I worked at, I was like, I want to work here. I loved all of them, but at the time there weren't jobs at all the schools. Right. And I think it was kind of interesting for me because I worked in LA, the continuation school, Azusa, whatever. And then I settled here in Laverne. And the misconception that I had is like one job would be harder or easier than the other. And it wasn't the case. Like I'm working in a school that, the income level is moderate to higher, right? We do have a lot of group home kids and all that kind of stuff. Am I frozen or no?
No.
Okay. And then you figure out in South Central LA, you assume more needs, and yeah, the kids do have a lot of needs, but sometimes expectations are higher in other schools too that you weren't aware of. Parents, want more than sometimes you can give as well. So I'd say that, I don't know, like I said, I would have worked at any of those schools full time. I love them all, and kids need help everywhere. And, mental health concerns are everywhere, and suicide assessments are everywhere, and maybe in places that you wouldn't think they would be. So that's kind of interesting in a bad way, but it is kind of interesting. And I would just say on the job hunt, like, what separates you from the other intern, right? Sometimes an intern is, to be honest with you, people see it as a nuisance, right? Because you're in their space, and I'm not being mean, I'm just being honest with you. You're in their space and you're not a self-starter and things of that nature. So be that person that does the extra, right? Be that person that says, like, I can do after school duty. I can take these kids on the field trip. I can help with the tutoring program, even when that's not my job. I think the extras are what separate you before the job and getting that opportunity, getting you that interview. And I think the extras are what hopefully make you the counselor that's not your high school counselor that you didn't know. You know what I mean? I hear that from a lot of parents. They're like, man, I didn't even know my high school counselor. And you know all the kids, like, you're out there playing with them. You're out there having fun with them, and I think that makes it rewarding on our end too, where it's like, by the end of their time here, I want to know every kid. Like, I want to know something about them. I want to have coached them. I want to have taken them on this trip. I want to, be a part of their life while they're here, and sometimes even after, and that feels good. So
Yeah, thank you for just speaking on that. And I thank all of you for also just kind of giving us those tips and that really helpful advice of, you may not know exactly where you're going at this point, graduating, but that's okay. You can take different paths and you can try different things and work with different populations. So yeah, I think that's really valuable. And I don't know if you have anything else to add, Fatima, but I think we might start transitioning into the Q&A portion. So if any of you folks have some questions that you're thinking about, and you'd like to ask, please feel free to raise your hand or chime in.
And if you're not comfortable speaking up, you can also put it in the chat. Oh, who is that? And and Vanessa is going to read the chat if you have any questions. I think one thing that I am kind of curious about is I think Corey and Angel in particular, and I'm sure Dom too, you all did different kinds of internships, right? During your programs, and you've also probably approached a lot of different types of faculty members, or supervisors, and so forth. If you were to give to this group of students, current students at Cal Poly Pomona, something they should never do when they're meeting a potential supervisor, can you think of some things that they really should never do or should try not to do when they're meeting a potential supervisor that you yourself have done or you've seen other people do, whether it's your own interns or whether it was yourself, that you feel like, don't do that?
I would say, I remember when I first started out, and I was lucky to get the job, to be honest with you, I was. I remember I feel like when you come out of school, at least I felt that way. I thought I knew more than I did, right? You take these classes and you think you know this stuff. And sometimes to older staff members, they're like, you're like 24 years old. You know what I mean? And you have to earn your bones, like you want to let them know that you don't know everything and you want to learn, and you show that through what you do, and you're going to make mistakes. I remember a couple of years in, or no, like a year or two, and I was like, I don't know if this is for me. Like some of the older teachers were kind of a pain, and I feel like I have pretty thick skin, and I'm like, man, I don't really like this. I might go back to sales or something, and you just get through it. You take some bumps and bruises, and you humble yourself, and you learn to approach different people in different ways. And yeah, you get through it and you come out in a better place. And yeah.
So don't be a know-it-all and don't get too cocky.
Especially when you're just starting.
Two things that come to mind, I mean, similar to what was mentioned, was assuming that your learning ends the day that you're done with your degree or any of your degrees, right? Because there's always room to continue to learn in any field, right? And just in life in general. And I think also, I mean, I think hopefully it goes without saying, but, being considerate of individuals' time when they're willing to take that extra step to mentor and provide that support. Because yeah, I mean, that's not a given, right? So when folks show that interest and that willingness to do that, so making sure that you're appreciative, and time is the greatest gift we can give. So having an appreciation when folks are willing to make that time, because everyone's busy, right, when you're looking at that. So
yeah, awesome. Dom?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is to be open to feedback, maybe constructive criticism, I would say, for you to grow as a professional in your field, specifically from those that are, simply think I have an amazing supervisor who's always willing to provide me with feedback, whether if I always ask her to do so. I just think for me, I want to continue to grow. I recently graduated from my graduate program, but that does not mean that I have stopped learning. You'll continue to grow as you move from different positions to a different role, whatever the case may be. And another tip, and this is more like an interview tip that I saw this happen a couple of times, specifically in the virtual interview environment. A lot of the times I was in group interviews, and some of the candidates would actually wait to the last minute to answer. So they would always be the last one. So I encourage you all to either go first, third, fifth, whatever the case is, and just kind of shift that up. And, and in case that you need some tips on how to navigate Zoom, whether that's raising your hand, practice that beforehand, because I've seen some things happen in interviews that were interesting during the virtual environment. So those are my tips.
I have one more tip to add. Good job on that. I have one more tip to add. You made me think. Something on an interview panel, and it definitely differs school to school, site to site, whatever the case may be. But I think just being genuine and thoughtful, right? People can read right through that. And I remember someone once told me, they're like, I don't care how smart you are, I care that you care about my kid. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I think that sometimes people, they have these, I got the degrees because I had to, honestly. Like, I did it because that was a step to get this position. Like, it doesn't mean that much to me, to be honest with you. Some people it does, and that's great, and that's a good thing, right? But it's just try to be real with people, just be honest and sincere. And I think over time, like, you're gonna win out most times with that kind of stuff. Same thing with an interview panel. I think they're gonna pick the lady or the guy or whoever it is that's genuine, as long as they meet the requirements as well.
Yeah, some really great ideas. One of the things that I just want to kind of piggyback on what Dom was saying is that, don't be the last person. And to that, don't be the last person to wait till the very end to ask these awesome folks some questions. So make sure that, you raise your hands and, shout out any types of questions or just observations that you may have. I think it's a good place to practice. As you're thinking about that, I did want to ask kind of a follow-up question, if that's okay with Calais, Vanessa, and Fatima, is that, looking back, I know that, Dom, you graduated a couple of years ago, and Corey and Angel a little bit longer. Although to me, I feel like it was just yesterday, I really do. I still remember hanging out with Corey in Hawaii, and I remember like sleeping on Angel's sofa in Maryland. I visited him when he was a grad student. And so, it just does feel like just the other day. But if you were to kind of think about, putting yourself in the shoe of those students who are here right now, what would you say, do X, Y, and Z while you're still there? What would the X, Y, and Z be? If you could give some words of wisdom on, you're in college, you're at Cal Poly, do X, Y, and Z. What is that? And I see Dom shaking her head. So I feel like you have something to say. And since you're the most fresh, right? In terms of just most recently, I'm going to start off with you.
Definitely. I don't know, the first thing that comes into mind, I don't know what, I guess just ask questions to those that you may see. For example, if you're out looking a specific role, or if you want to connect with an office on campus, many of you have shared that you're in the process of applying. And keep in mind, at Cal Poly, there are those offices that you might potentially want to work at in the future. Tap on the shoulder of those that are already in the role on campus, whether that's the Career Center, EOPS, the transfer program, Poly Transfer, for example, Renaissance Scholars, any of those programs, and ask questions. Do informational interviews. I feel like that's something I wish I would have done while I was there, but I didn't know that was a thing until I got into graduate school. So I was laughing because that's something I wish I would have done. I started doing after Cal Poly, but you all still have enough time to do so.
Yeah, similar to what was mentioned, but I mean, ask questions, right? And take risks. I mean, the opportunity you have in the college learning environment to really gain exposure to areas that you may have not considered for a potential career. And like the informational interview piece, it sounds so intimidating, but really sitting down with somebody, and you'll find like our hour here is like flew by, right? And being able to make that connection with folks, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is another one, right? Because that's really where the growth comes from.
Yeah, and I don't think I have too much to add. You guys did a nice job, but I think just taking the time to sit down with whoever the mentors are or areas of interest, and like not even having an agenda necessarily, right? Just picking their brains and hearing them out rather than in a classroom setting, maybe just taking that time to get that one-on-one, and maybe they have something that they'd share with you that they're not sharing with everyone else. I don't know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Fatima, Vanessa, and Kalei?
Yeah, I guess just kind of touching on, or like going off of what you folks just talked about. You've mentioned like the information interviews a couple times now, and getting comfortable with like approaching those people who are already in those roles so that we can learn from them. And I guess if someone like one of us were to approach you folks, sorry, there's an airplane. How would you kind of recommend us as students to reach out to folks that are in positions that we are curious about or looking into? And how would you want someone to kind of like email you or approach you for the same thing?
I would say call them. To be honest with you, I'd have a harder time saying no if someone called me. You know what I mean? Because it seems like, and I'm sure your guys' schedule is different, so maybe a little different, but it seems like it kind of comes in waves, right? A semester starting or a quarter starting, and then you get kind of a flood of, hey, I'm a whatever year student at this school, and I'd like to do my internship. And there's no personal connection. Even if the person's great, they're nice, you're busy, we're all busy, right? But I feel like a call would be like, hey, you're on the phone with them, or you feel like you need to call them back and hear them out. And there may be something that kind of resonates with you, where you're like, I want to help this person. Like they have a story. And if you're getting a bunch of emails, or I may or may not, depending on the situation and how many you get and how busy you are and all that.
I think the piece that was going along what was mentioned, I would say plan ahead, right? So whether it's phone or email, if you're proactively seeking an opportunity, right? It's gonna go further with me if you're reaching out a month or two in advance versus, hey, I need to do an informational interview tomorrow. Like, that can unintentionally come off like disingenuine, right? When we're looking at that. I think you'll find those that have received transformational mentorship feel an obligation to pay it forward, right? So with that said, again, back to being considerate and planning ahead, showing an appreciation and consideration for the time somebody might be willing to invest, right? And I think that's more likely to happen when you see somebody's being proactive in that planning.
I think I have one last thing to add. I think you both mentioned really, really great tips. But I would suggest looking into maybe platforms. I know on Facebook there's student groups. For example, empowering first generation college student groups on Facebook, which is a platform that offers Shen. And there's varying platforms that you could join, and they're all really a community of support that you could tap on and reach out either through that platform, LinkedIn, of course. I really like the idea of the phone call because I think it adds that personal touch and that trust that you're genuine and you want to reach out and learn. But that would be all I have to add. Mm-hmm.
Also, I know that this is a virtual climate, but Corey, Dominique, and Angel's been back a couple times for different things to campus, but we'd love to have you back on campus. And it'd be wonderful to have you back as like professor for a day, where you can kind of talk and, have a meal with other folks. We can't go to Hawaii together, but we can be at Cal Poly together, or we could go to Hawaii together. But I think Angel is the first group. We talked about doing a reunion.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was a 2003. So I think we're saying in 2023, it'll be our 20-year
Wow.
reunion. So we need to do that. And Corey, you're 2005, I think, right? Because you were
I
with
think, yeah, I think-
Melissa and Shaheen and that group, right? So yeah,
yeah,
they're talking about doing a reunion too with Eric and Lorena.
I love
So
it.
yeah, they were saying, yeah,
Marriages, right? 2 marriages came out of that group.
2 marriages,
Yeah.
yeah. And 2 marriages, and I think a combination of 7 children, I think. So yeah, a lot of kids. But yeah, so I do want to open it up. You know, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. I'm also checking on Facebook to see if anyone's on, to see if folks have questions. I know people have been on and off on Facebook, just kind of looking at the live. But do any of you have questions? I do see one hand up. Who is it? I can't tell who it is.
It's me, Vanessa.
Okay, Vanessa.
Hello. So my question to you guys is, what did you guys learn about yourselves while being in your position of, you know, working with other students, being like technically a mentor? Like, what did you learn about yourself?
So much. I mean, and to continue to learn. Gosh, for me, I mean, the power of education, right? And in our role as counselors and educators in that process. I will say that as a counselor, it's important to do that introspective, reflective work, because it's so true. You really can't help others until you've helped yourself and continue to help yourself. Because again, the more you know about your experience, the more you can pour into others. I think that's critical when you're looking at self-care and when you're helping people make meanings out of the challenges and experiences they have.
I think I've learned about myself. I think we all have certain opinions or stands on certain things when we're younger, and a lot of those can change. And just being kind of open to different situations and not so opinionated, and meeting needs, you know what I'm saying? Whatever those needs of those kids are, is just finding a way to meet the needs, whether you agree with certain things or not.
I think for myself, you learn so much while you're going through graduate school, while you're on the job hunt and you're in your first brand new role. But I think right now, what I think I could provide you all is to genuinely take care of yourself. I know we keep saying self-care, but to me, when I meet with the student, and sometimes they may come with a lot, they may share with you something very vulnerable. And at times you have to ensure that you are okay after that's being shared with you. So certain things that I'd like to practice when I work from home, I usually take a walk around during my lunch. And if I'm working in the office, then I'll go across the street and grab lunch. Or I'll watch like my favorite Netflix series on my lunch. Really anything that will help you push through the day when something like that is shared. I think I've encountered that when I was working at my previous roles and then in this current role. So I invite you all to like think of what helps you in that instance to be able to clear your mind, to be able to support the next student.
Thanks all. Great question, Vanessa. If we don't have any other questions, we're going to give everyone a round of applause and thank them for coming. Thank you so much for spending the last hour and 10 minutes with us. Always a joy, and even though Angel's graduated for the longest period of time in 2003, I know I'm constantly
reminding me.
I know, sorry about Angel, but I see Angel quite a bit actually, yeah, and we've stayed in touch because this is a funny story. Is my daughter, who is now 21, in the very first trip with Hawaii when she was 2, decided Angel was her friend.
Yes, and
she started inviting him to her birthday parties, and so that's how we became friends. And now I get to see his 2 beautiful children, and I was so thrilled to reconnect with Corey, because Corey has always been this very chill, easygoing, very likable, get along with anybody type of person. And so, you know, when we got reconnected via Facebook, right, and just kind of touch base and say, hey, what are you up to? You know, I've never forgotten about Corey. So I think the last time I actually talked to you is when you asked me for a letter of rec. I think that was the last time. And then
I probably went against Angel's wishes and asked you the day of.
yeah, I think it was the day before, but
Okay.
you know, I got you. So, but yeah, and then, you know, Dom obviously was such an instrumental part in our, you know, PM program, you know, really right before we went virtual, right? And she was part of an awesome leadership team. So, you know, I'm so happy to see all of you thrive and grow, and am very thankful that you're able to help support our students in this way. And I want to give a special shout out to Kalei, Fatima, and Vanessa for being the dynamic trio in terms of getting all of this together and creating a space where, you know, folks are able to engage and dialogue about the kinds of questions that many of you may have. Maybe we don't have questions because you all did such a great job of asking the questions, right? So thank you all so much. And yeah, let's try to meet in person. Let's do it.
That'd be awesome.
Let's do it. Well, Dom, we're overdue. The last time I saw Dominique was at Dunkin' Donuts in a rain by the car where it was
Yes.
walking envelope. That was
Oh
in
my
Long Beach or
goodness.
something. That was funny.
Yes.
Send
Yeah.
us those airfare vouchers and we'll meet Kalea.
Yeah, well, you know, I am taking students to Hawaii in January, so Kalei is going to meet up with us and do a hike or
that's
something.
awesome.
But Corey and Angel, we got to get that original two group together and merge in some way.
I love it.
Yeah, and I think if Corey, I mean, Dom has already shared her email with all of you. So if you have questions or you want to respond, I will also share this on the Facebook Live page, if that's okay, Dominic.
Mhm.
And then Angel as well has put in. And then I think with Corey, he just wants you to call him. Just kidding.
You could email me. I'm just saying, you know.
Yeah, so he has his email here as well. But yeah, thank you all for coming. Lovely to see some of you here today. And yeah, have a great rest of the time. And if I can just ask Corey, Dom, and Angel, and Kalei and Vanessa and Fatima, you can stay on too if you like. Just really quick, so just some housekeeping. I'm going to stop the live stream and I